I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, November the 21st, brought to you in part by Macrocin by Bimeda. Are you interested in saving money with Macrocin? Go to macrocin.com to learn about how it compared head-to-head with Pioneer products that you're familiar with on a 4,600 head trial. Also, Joplin Regional Stockyards, big yearling special here today on Monday. Going to have around 12,000 head of cattle, be 150 pot loads of cattle, yearlings. It's the yearling special there. Where are you going to go? There's nowhere else you could go to find 150 straight loads of true yearling cattle. And you think, well, how can they come up with that many yearlings? You know, that fescue grass is cool season. And I realized it was dry in southwest Missouri, a lot of the heat of the summer, you can't do a whole lot there with that fescue, but late in the summer they had a little bit of rain and some spots there, had some moisture that fell over the early fall, and they got some regrowth on that fescue. They had yearlings turned out. They're coming back in to be marketed there at Joplin Regional Stockyards at the yearling special. They're going to be started early. They'll be going at 6 here this morning. And if you guys want to get in on that, just go to dvauction.com and check that sale out. 12,000 head of cattle and 150 straight loads of true yearlings. Unbelievable. This is what we've been waiting for. We've been waiting for the supply and demand to finally catch a hold and to get enough true, black and white print that we can show to investors, to show them how tight that our supplies are. We know our demand continues good. Even we've got inflation, our beef demand remains good. Even on the more expensive cuts, especially for export. And the thing, it's always a downfall. What is it? Our feed costs. These feed costs are unbelievably high. Whenever we were planning on this cycle, getting to this point and us having extremely tight numbers of feeder cattle and beef cows, and we assumed that our demand would stay good, we didn't know that the feed costs were going to be this high. Of course, how would you know? But the feed costs are taking the fun out of it, guys. Our corn, Chicago Board of Trade corn is $6.67 and change a bushel. But our cash corn costs are a lot higher than that. Right there where they make it, Council Bluffs, Iowa, you've got your cheapest cash corn is like $7.20 a bushel right there. It doesn't get any cheaper than right there. That's where it's from. What do you think it's going to be when you get down here to the southern plains? And like I said, I think a lot of these farmer feeders are lying to themselves about what they can put those pounds on for. A lot of these commercial feedlots are not lying to themselves. They know what's going on. Even though the fat cattle market's going up, even though things are looking good in their favor, they just can't afford to pay any more for feeder cattle because they just won't pencil. They're already leaving a lot of themselves open for a downhill swing. They're betting on the come like always, but we should see things spur up here quite a bit. The cattle on feed report that came out on Friday was bullish. Not just a little bit, but bullish, and it was as bullish as we could have ever hoped for it to be. And we knew it was coming. So a lot of times you think, well, we'll kind of build that in there and then we won't really recognize that much of it. No, we had it built in there and we still recognized it. So we're going to talk about your cattle on feed report that come out on Friday. It's going to give a good shot of B12 and arm to your feeder cattle market. Like I said, our fat cattle have been going up. We've got tight supplies. People are demanding feeder cattle, but they just can't pay anymore for them because of what the cost of gains are going to be. Well, maybe this will behoove some feeders to go in and bet on the come a little bit more because things are really, really bullish right now. And the calf deal should get more bullish because it's going to continue to stay that way for at least the next 3 years, guys. But we're just barely on the cusp of it right now. But you look at the cattle on feed report that come out on Friday. It had your inventory numbers for November the 1st. They were expecting them to be 98.3, and they come out to be 98 point nothing. So you think, well, that's not that big a deal. Well, that is not. But your placements, and that's really what the cattle on feed report is anymore, is placements. Placements are the hardest to pinpoint. They're the hardest to know what's going to come in, and it's always the biggest surprise. But your placements, they were expecting them to come in at 96.3% of the same report a year ago, and they ended up coming in at 93.8. That is very bullish. 2.5 percentage points right there. That is bullish, especially when we're scared we may not even have tripped the triggers that they set before us, the average of the analysts guess, and they ended up, going way farther than what they had laid for us. Marketings were just about like they always are. They're always in there real tight. We know exactly how many days we have. We know exactly how many cattle have been slaughtered, so that's not that hard to hit. But they come in at 100.6, and they were expecting them at 101, so that's plenty close enough. If you look at some of the data a little bit closer, you see that your inventories of cattle on feed, and on November the 1st, they were higher in Texas, Iowa, and Nebraska. Had a few more cattle on in the feedlots right there. But in Kansas and in Colorado, quite a bit lighter. I don't know if you can tell anything by that. We don't get to know a whole lot about what's going on in Colorado, period. They never print any information. It's one of our 5 area feeding regions, and we never get any information on there as far as marketing or anything like that. So it's hard to really tell unless you're just right in there on top of it what's going on. But it did surprise me to see that your Kansas inventories cattle on feed were as much lighter as they were compared to the big 3 there. But your placements were down everywhere except for Washington and Idaho. All of your major states, they were all down. Your placement numbers were down. And cattle placed 900 pounds and down, your lighter cattle, they were all a lot lighter than a year ago. Now, some of your bigger, heavier feeder cattle were similar to what they were a year ago, but this deal is going to get progressively tighter as we move on. And so we've likely seen the lightest placement total for an October report for October placements than we've ever seen. Of course, something's always bigger or taller or wider or heavier or whatever than anything's ever happened since the series began. I've told you guys that before, but that's what it was this month. But let's look at your board for last week. December live cattle futures. Monday was up a nickel. Tuesday was down 30. Wednesday up 52. Thursday up 95. And Friday up 32. And they'll be up today on Monday here too. But December live cattle futures ended the week at 153.07, up $1.55. February ended the week at 155.85, up $2.50 for the week. Feeder cattle for January, we lost November back on Thursday. They're at 175.85, but January feeder cattle, Monday was up 87. Tuesday a big downer day. That was all that turmoil about what was going on with the grains, if you guys remember that, and where we had that errant bomb or missile that went over into Poland, and we got worried about that, and then upon further investigation we think it was just a Ukrainian missile that got over there somehow or another. But Tuesday was down 242 on feeder cattle. Wednesday was up 45, Thursday up $2.50, Friday up 80, with January feeder cattle ending the week at 180.77. That was up $2.20 for the week. March ended the week at 183.12. Look at your grain, Chicago Board of Trade corn futures. Like I said, our cash is so much higher. We've got huge positive basis in the country everywhere, and we're just finished up with harvest here. I'm not sure why the board's running so far back of what cash is, but huge plus basis everywhere. But 667 3/4 ending the week for December. Chicago Board of Trade corn, that was up 9 3/4 cents for the week. Beans for January ended the week up 14.28 1/4, and that was up 27 1/4 cents. Your fat cattle trade up through Thursday of last week, because we hadn't found out the complete movement and everything that happened all the way through. But up through Thursday, 68,700 head, be a little bit light. But your live sales of steers and heifers and dress sales too were steady to $1 higher. But within that, there was some changes there. Your live sales in the 5-area feeding region ranged from 148 to 156. In the southern plains, it was mostly 152 later. But we had quite a bit of trade in Texas, about 5,000 head that traded at 150. That's holding our weighted average back a little bit. I'm not thinking that it's the cash sellers, the feedlots, the few negotiated guys that brought about the higher market in the southern plains. I think the packers just decided to give it to them because it sets so much. It's been holding your weighted average back on a lot of these program cattle and things. They just threw it out there on Thursday at 152, but they were already selling cattle at 150 in Texas. But your weighted average up through Thursday on live steers and heifers in your 5-area feeding region was 150.268. That is actually 3 cents lower. Now I think when we get the little dab of Friday trade that we know about and a little bit of extra that it's all rounded up, I do think that our weighted average on a live basis in the 5-area feeding region will be a little bit higher, but not much. It's going to be pretty close to steady. But when you're selling Southern Plains bulk at 152, that's $2 higher. Your Northern Plains was kind of steady to firm from 152 up to 154 and a little bit of 155, but not enough to pull your weighted average as much as I thought it would. Dress sales 236 to 244. Weighted average on dress steers 241.79. That was up 51 cents, so we gained some ground there, but the market was higher last week, and that's good, and I think it should continue higher. Your packers have showed their hand that they're really tight on purchases. I realize we're in a short week this week with Thanksgiving here, but they're expecting a huge week here between next week after we get past Thanksgiving up until we get to the Christmas holiday. They're going to want to stamp on the gas, and they're going to want to really turn those chain speeds up. It's up to the few guys that sell negotiated cattle to get a higher market between now and then. But look at what happened on Friday. We had 3,100 head confirmed on Friday. Could have been a little more later. And 25,300 head for the week. In Iowa, live sales on Friday 153 to 156 in Iowa, the extreme top of the range. Dress sales at 244, and that's as high as we saw dress sales. Nebraska only about 200 head, 22,600 head for the week. About 6,400 negotiated grid, and we normally don't see quite that much negotiated grid in Nebraska, but live sales in Nebraska on Friday 153 and 242 dressed. Kansas only a couple hundred head confirmed on Friday, but I think there's going to be a little bit more by the time we get them all rounded up. 13,800 head for the week in Kansas. That's a little bit light for them, but a decent movement, being the market was $2 higher for the most part. But look at their negotiated grid in Kansas, 17,700 head. 4,000 more than their pure negotiated sales, guys. We're not going to have any pure negotiated sales. Nobody wanted to help get the bill, Cattle Price Discovery and Transparency Act, to maintain the minuscule levels we had in negotiated trade. So we'll be losing our negotiated trade. I fully believe that's what's going to happen. And you see where it's all going to go. It's going to go to negotiated grid, but there's no negotiation to the grid. But people still want it. Had a few mixed cattle at 152, so that's telling you that the market was sure 152. No sales confirmed in Texas on Friday. 5,500 negotiated grid and 10,600 pure negotiated cash in Texas for last week. Box beef cutout values quite a bit lower after your packers were able to get their box beef cutouts up over the last 2 or 3 months. It's just kind of been a slow gain there. They lost quite a bit of it last week. Choice cuts, and on the weighted average of all of last week's sales, 257.08, that was down 6.19, and your late Friday quotes were about 2.25 cents lower than that at 254.87. Selects, your weighted average for last week was 232.18, down 368 compared to the weighted average from the previous week. And late sales on Friday afternoon down about 75 cents from that weighted average at 232.83 for late sales in on select and your box beef cutouts. But your choice select spread on the weighted average was just under $25, $24.90. That's come down quite a bit, but pretty brisk movement on the spot trade that we don't see all that much of 752 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings on your spot box beef trade last week. Well, it's, you would expect that with the prices coming down. Some of those end users come in there and those wholesalers and bought up quite a bit of product. Slaughter for last week, 674,000. That's one of our big weeks. Was 3,000 more than the previous week, but it was about 6,000 less than the same week a year ago. And we've been running a little bit ahead of the same week a year ago, pretty much all fall here. But we did have a 70,000 head harvest a year ago Saturday, and this past Saturday just 34. So that's the way that happens. Talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DV auction ended the week at 174.40 based on an 800-pound cash steer up through your middle 12 states. That was up $1.39 for the week. Don't forget, if you're looking at a sale that's got some premium type cattle in it on Monday here, Russell Livestock in Russell, Iowa. You can watch them on dvauction.com. They've got a big, nice offering of fancy calves and some yearling cattle there to bid on at Russell, Iowa here today on Monday. Let's talk about your big sales late last week and over the weekend. How about Fort Scott, Kansas? Fort Scott Livestock had about 2,200 head of feeders on Saturday. Pretty good run for them. Had a stick out deal on some big heavy steers. 59 head of steers weighed 896 at 177.35. That's about 100 pounds bigger and about $3 higher than your 800-pound index average there. A big sale out there in western South Dakota. St. Onge Livestock, my buddy Justin Tupper, they had 4,600 at their sale on Friday there. Calves were over 500 pounds were steady, but the peewees were dollars higher there. Stick out deal on some pretty good sized calves, short yearling, whatever you want to call them. 66 steer calves weighed 668 at 196. That's a big quote, weighing up there close to 700 pounds. How about your Zoetta stick out sale of the day for the end of last week? Fort Pierre livestock auction in Fort Pierce, South Dakota. Just short of 10,000 head for the weekly feeder cattle auction in Fort Pierce, South Dakota. Your lighter calves were mostly $2 to $6 higher. Pulled out several big quotes here. Here's a drafts of over 100 head, and you see in there big steer quote there on some heavy full weight steers. 112 head of 470 pound steer calves bring 245.50. Wow, and look at that big quote on the heifers. These had to have been replacements, or at least some to kept to sort through later. 102 head of fancy heifer calves weigh 522 at 224. I was out over the weekend in Fallon, Nevada at Nevada Livestock Marketing. My buddies Jack and Rachel Payne there. We had a good sale, ended up being a 2-day deal, but we didn't run very long on Saturday. We was done before noon, but had some impressive quotes there. How about this quote of steer calf quotes out of northern Nevada there? 112 head of 503-pound steer calves bring $212.50 at Nevada Livestock Marketing on Friday. How about winter livestock in winter South Dakota? 97 steers weighed 637 at $213.50. That was a big quote, but the most impressive quote that I saw anywhere late last week or over the weekend in your Macrison No BS top quote for the day come out of Bloomington Livestock Exchange in Bloomington, Wisconsin. 54 steers weighed 970 pounds at $1.74. And that's your feeder flash for Monday.